So welcome back to another deep dive. Today we are looking at something that is, it's a little uncomfortable to think about,
It really is.
but it's super important. We're looking at a stack of sources today covering behavioral economics, systems thinking, and, strategic design.
Mm-hmm.
Books like Poor Economics, Good Strategy, Bad Strategy, Thinking in Systems, and Scarcity.
Right. A really great stack.
Yeah, and our mission today is to investigate this profound glitch in human psychology. This idea of why our hearts absolutely bleed for one single person in trouble, but then we just kind of go numb when it's millions of people.
Exactly.
And more importantly, how understanding that glitch can completely revolutionize how we design strategies for businesses or global development or just, our own lives.
It's a huge shift in perspective.
It is. Okay, let's unpack this. Because there's this classic thought experiment by the philosopher Peter Singer.
Oh, yeah, the drowning child.
Right. So imagine you're walking past a shallow pond in a park. You are wearing a brand new $1,000 suit. And out of the corner of your eye, you see a child thrashing in the water, drowning.
Right.
You wouldn't even hesitate, right? You would plunge right in, ruin the suit, pull the kid out. The
Yeah.
financial cost of those clothes wouldn't even cross your mind in that split second.
Of course not. You just act.
But here is the really uncomfortable truth. For a fraction of that $1,000, you could save the life of a child on the other side of the world right now.
Yes.
And yet most of us don't do that. We buy the suit, we upgrade our phones, we just go about our day. Why is that?
Well, it's one of the most profound behavioral paradoxes that we face. And to Singer's point, globally, about 9 million children die every year before their 5th birthday.
God, 9 million.
Right, and mostly from preventable causes. But we hear that statistic and our minds just hit a wall. We don't sprint to help the way we would if the child was right in front of us.
And it feels like a moral failing, like we're just heartless.
Well, I think that's an essential context to establish right up front. We have to strip away the moral judgment to actually understand the mechanism here.
Okay.
Because this phenomenon, it's not evidence that human beings are inherently cruel or malicious. What we're looking at is the fundamental architecture of human thought.
We were wired.
Exactly. The human mind evolved as a highly localized processor. We are optimized to respond to the immediate, the visible, tangible threats or opportunities right in our physical vicinity.
Because that's what kept us alive on the savannah.
Right. We didn't evolve to be global supercomputers processing abstract data on millions of invisible people.
So it's basically like we are running this Pleistocene-era software in a modern, hyper-connected world.
That's a perfect way to put it, yeah.
So to understand how this impacts global strategy, I want to look at this fascinating experiment from Poor Economics, because I think it explains the mechanism in really simple terms.
Oh, the Penn experiment.
Yeah, the University of Pennsylvania one. So researchers wanted to test exactly how our empathy responds to different types of information.
Mm-hmm.
So they gave students $5 for completing this quick survey.
Right.
And then as the students were leaving, they handed them a flyer and asked, hey, do you want to donate a portion of that $5 you just made to save the children?
And the brilliance of this experiment is in the 2 different variations of that flyer. They were testing this friction between statistical reality and individual narrative.
Okay, so walk me through the first flyer.
So the first flyer, let's call it the statistical control, it was loaded with massive, objectively terrifying numbers.
Like the 9 million kids thing.
Exactly. It informed the students that severe food shortages in Malawi were affecting 3 million children.
Wow.
And it detailed how rainfall deficits in Zambia had triggered a 42% drop in maize production.
That sounds like a news report.
Right. It painted an accurate macro-level picture of a systemic humanitarian crisis.
But I can just imagine reading that flyer and feeling instantly paralyzed. Like, what is my $5 going to do against a 42% drop in a country's agriculture?
And that is exactly what happened to the donations. They were very low. But the second flyer took a completely different approach.
What did they do?
They completely ignored the 3 million kids. They didn't mention Zambia, no statistics on maize production. It just showed a picture of one single 7-year-old girl named Rokia from Mali.
Just one kid?
Just one. It gave a brief description of her life, her family, and explained that her specific situation would be directly improved by the donation.
And I'm guessing the results were pretty different.
Staggering. The students gave significantly more of their $5 to Rukia than they did to the abstract millions in the first flyer.
That is just wild. So it's like our attention is a flashlight beam in a completely dark warehouse.
Oh, I like that.
We can only illuminate one specific thing at a time. If you stand there and tell me the whole warehouse is dark and filled with millions of problems, my brain just can't process the scale of it. It's too vast.
Right, the beam isn't wide enough.
Yeah, I end up doing nothing.
Yeah.
But if you shine that flashlight beam onto one single person standing 10 feet away, suddenly I care. I can see them. I have a target for my action.
That flashlight analogy works incredibly well, especially when you connect it to a concept from thinking in systems. Herbert Simon actually coined a term for this.
Oh, what is it?
He called it bounded rationality.
Bounded rationality. Okay.
The core premise is that human beings make decisions based on localized, profoundly incomplete information. And crucially, even if we were handed perfect, comprehensive information like that statistical flyer, our cognitive bandwidth simply cannot compute all those variables at once.
So we literally don't have the processing power.
Exactly. We operate rationally, but only within the narrow bounds of what our flashlight can currently illuminate. Outside of that beam, we rely on heuristics, biases, emotional triggers.
Which explains so much about risk perception, too. I was looking at the research from economies and cultures, and they talk about why people are absolutely terrified of things like shark attacks or a nuclear meltdown, but they will happily text while driving down the highway.
Yes, the risk perception gap.
Right. The statistical probability of dying in a car crash is infinitely higher. But a car crash is like the rainfall deficits in Zambia. It's a mundane, everyday statistic.
It doesn't trigger the alarm.
But a shark attack, that is vivid. That is terrifying. That is an identifiable victim.
We consistently overweight vivid, highly imaginable events, and we severely discount broad statistical evidence. And as Richard Rumelt points out in Good Strategy, Bad Strategy, this cognitive bias heavily distorts how organizations try to solve complex problems too.
Because they're run by humans.
Right. We have this pervasive belief in modern management and global development that big data is the ultimate solvent. We assume that if we just collect enough statistics, the solution will just magically reveal itself.
But wait, aren't massive global organizations supposed to use big data? I mean, if the World Bank is trying to fix global poverty, shouldn't they look at the statistics?
Well, this raises an important question because, of course, you need data. You need it to understand the boundaries of a problem. But relying only on data leads to failed top-down interventions.
How so?
Because the authors of Poor Economics are very explicit about this. Poverty is a complex system of feedback loops. It's not just a math problem.
Okay.
And top-down solutions fail when they ignore what the authors call the 3 is, which are deeply human, completely irrational factors.
The 3 is, what are they?
Ideology, ignorance, and inertia.
Oh, wow. Okay, give me an example of how those actually dismantle a data-driven strategy, because they sound exactly like the dark corners the flashlight isn't hitting.
Let's take a hypothetical health intervention. A global NGO looks at a spreadsheet and sees high rates of waterborne illness in a specific region.
Okay, so the data says the water is bad.
Right. And the statistical rational solution is obvious. Distribute chlorine tablets to purify the water, so they ship millions of tablets. But 6 months later, the disease rates haven't dropped at all.
Why not? The chlorine works, right?
The chlorine works mathematically, but the spreadsheet couldn't capture the ideology. Perhaps the local population holds a deep-seated cultural belief that adding chemicals to water makes it unnatural or even harmful.
Oh, so they just refuse to use it.
Exactly. Or the spreadsheet misses the ignorance. Maybe the community doesn't actually understand the germ theory of disease, so the idea of tiny invisible bugs making them sick seems absurd to them.
So they think the NGO is just crazy.
Right. And most powerfully, the spreadsheet misses inertia.
Which is just the sheer force of habit, right? The difficulty of changing a daily routine.
Yes. Even if a mother knows the water might be contaminated, boiling it or adding chlorine requires an extra deliberate step every single day. And human beings, universally, default to the path of least resistance.
So if the status quo is easier, inertia wins.
Every time. You cannot solve ideology, ignorance, or inertia with a macro-level spreadsheet. You can only solve them by understanding the daily, localized friction of the identifiable person.
That makes total sense.
Yeah.
And it really brings in the design thinking perspective from change by design. Because Tim Brown talks about how you can't design a solution for a statistic.
You really can't.
You have to design for human. Empathy isn't just a moral imperative here. It's actually a cold, hard, strategic tool.
It absolutely is. Empathy bridges the gap between those statistical goals and actual human behavior. A perfect illustration of this is the emergency room case study.
Oh, tell me about that.
So, a hospital wanted to completely restructure its emergency department, right, to improve patient experience.
Okay.
Now, a traditional management consultant would approach this totally top down. They'd pull the data on average wait times, bed turnover rates, triage flow. They'd try to mathematically optimize the processing of human bodies through the facility.
Basically, treat the hospital like a factory assembly line.
Precisely. But a design thinker named Christian Simsarian took a radically different approach. He didn't even ask for the spreadsheets.
What did he do?
He went undercover as a patient, he feigned a foot injury, checked into the ER, and brought a hidden camera with him.
Wait, a hidden camera? He just pretended to be a patient?
He did. He allowed himself to be placed on a gurney and just wheeled through the system. And by doing this, he wasn't tracking the flow rate or the statistics. He was experiencing the crushing boredom, the intense vulnerability, the anxiety of staring up at acoustic ceiling tiles for hours.
Wow, so he forced himself to become the identifiable victim of their own design flaws.
Yes. Because if you just tweak the mathematical efficiency, if you reduce the wait time from 4 hours to 3.5 hours, you haven't actually addressed the terror and disorientation that the patient feels during that time.
You optimize the statistic, but you failed the human.
Exactly. When he played that unedited footage for the hospital administrators, it shattered their abstract understanding of the problem. Strategic design requires zooming in on that granular user journey to find the actual leverage points.
That is so powerful. So if we take this tension between statistical systems and identifiable human behavior, and we apply it to something massive like global poverty, how does that play out in the real world?
It's fascinating when you look at it through this lens. Let's look at the South Asian informal markets.
Okay, yeah, in poor economics, there's this incredible breakdown of the women selling fruit in Chennai, India.
Yes, the tomato sellers.
Right. These women selling tomatoes on tarps by the side of the road. And their daily economic friction is just staggering. They borrow roughly 1,000 rupees in the morning to buy their stock, and then they have to pay it back at night at these astronomical interest rates.
Sometimes up to 57% annually.
57%. That is completely irrational to a Western financial observer. Why don't formal banks just step in? Statistically, it's a massive untapped market.
It seems like an obvious solution.
Right. A bank could come in with normal interest rates, undercut the local lenders, and instantly improve these women's lives. Why doesn't that happen?
Well, this is where the reality of scarcity comes in. The book Scarcity explains the psychological mechanism called the bandwidth tax.
The bandwidth tax.
Yes. When a person is trapped in extreme poverty, they are constantly firefighting just to survive. This causes what researchers call tunneling. Their cognitive bandwidth is entirely consumed by the immediate crisis.
So the flashlight beam narrows even further.
Exactly. Inside the tunnel is, I need to sell enough tomatoes today to feed my family tonight. Everything outside the tunnel, like the compounding math of a 57% interest rate, is just dropped from cognitive processing.
Because they just don't have the luxury to think about it.
Right. Now, put a formal bank into that environment. A bank relies on statistical data, credit scores, legal contracts. The administrative cost for a formal bank to gather that data on a woman borrowing 1,000 rupees a day is wildly unprofitable.
Oh, I see. And if she defaults, what are they going to do? Repossess a tarp full of tomatoes.
Exactly. The enforcement mechanism just isn't there. So what's fascinating here is how the informal lenders succeed where the banks fail.
The local moneylenders.
Yes, historically, people like the Kabuliwalas or local village lenders, they don't rely on credit scores. They rely on personal, identifiable relationships.
They just know the people.
Right. They live in the community. Their cost of gathering information is zero. And their enforcement mechanism isn't a contract. It's the threat of social shame or even physical harm. They operate entirely in the identifiable realm.
So they're using the identifiable victim bias, but in a kind of predatory way.
Yes. But this is exactly what sparked the microfinance revolution. Organizations like Spandana in India or the Grameen model by Muhammad Yunus, they hacked this psychological reality.
How did they do that?
Instead of relying on formal statistics, they reinvented money lending for a social purpose. They introduced joint liability.
Joint liability. Okay, so lending to a group instead of an individual.
Right. They lend to a small group of women who know each other well. So they use the identifiable victim bias as a feature, not a bug. If you default, you aren't hurting a faceless bank in a skyscraper. You're hurting Padmaja, your neighbor, who is sitting right next to you.
Wow. So the threat of social shame in front of your peers practically guarantees a 0% default rate.
Exactly. But they also address another psychological hurdle, which is time inconsistency.
Time inconsistency. That's like when we are impulsive in the present and struggle to plan for the future, right?
Yes. Humans heavily discount future consequences in favor of immediate relief. We struggle to plan because the future is a statistical abstraction.
Like saying, I'll start my diet next month, but eating a donut today.
Exactly. So microfinance creates weekly meetings. It's an immediate, highly visible social ritual that forces people to save and repay in tiny increments. It bypasses our inability to act on long-term statistical goals by putting the obligation right in front of us every single week.
That is absolutely brilliant. They didn't try to fix the psychology, they just designed the system around it.
Exactly.
So this isn't just about global poverty or microfinance, though. This psychological glitch affects boardrooms and corporate strategy every single day, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely.
So if I'm a CEO or a team leader listening to this, what is the biggest mistake I make if I ignore this concept?
Well, according to Good Strategy, Bad Strategy, the biggest mistake a leader makes is confusing ambition with strategy.
Confusing ambition with strategy.
Yes. Leaders constantly mistake goal setting, which is mostly just statistics and ambitions, with actual strategy, which is diagnosing human obstacles and designing coordinated action to overcome them.
Can you give me an example of what that looks like when it fails?
Look at the DEC example, the Digital Equipment Corporation.
Okay.
The CEO at the time saw the industry shifting, but instead of making hard choices, he forced a compromise among his executives. The result was this fluffy statistical goal: providing high-quality products and services, and being a leader in data processing.
That sounds like every corporate mission statement ever written. It means absolutely nothing.
Exactly. It was completely devoid of hard choices or identifiable actions. It didn't give the engineers or the sales team any specific problem to solve.
And here's where it gets really interesting to me, because leaders think they are being rational when they do this. But they suffer from these biases too, right?
Yes, especially the inside view and social herding.
The inside view, that's believing your company is special, and the normal statistics don't apply to you.
Right. You think, sure, most startups fail, but we have great culture. And social herding is just doing what everyone else is doing because you're scared of ambiguity.
So if a CEO just mandates a statistical target, like we need to increase market share by 5%, it fails because it doesn't give the team an identifiable specification.
Yes.
It's exactly like the Save the Children flyer.
Oh, that's a great connection.
A CEO telling their company, we need to make $10 million this quarter, is just as ineffective as a flyer saying 3 million kids are hungry. It just paralyzes people. A real strategy gives the team one identifiable victim, right? Like a specific competitor to beat or one specific customer pain point to solve.
I completely agree. Good strategy absorbs the ambiguity of the massive system and hands the organization a simpler, solvable, highly vivid problem. You have to translate the macro data into a micro narrative.
So what does this all mean if we step back and look at the whole picture?
Well, I think it means we have to acknowledge our own hardware. Our brains cannot process the millions. We are built for the one.
Yeah.
Whether you are designing a global aid policy, a microloan system in India, or a corporate strategy, if you rely only on statistics, you will fail. You must connect your sister to the identifiable, the vivid, and the deeply human.
You have to find Rokia from Mali in whatever problem you're trying to solve.
Exactly. But I want to leave you with a final, somewhat provocative thought, inspired by Donella Meadows from Thinking in Systems.
Okay, lay it on me.
She argued that the highest leverage point in any system is the mindset out of which it arises.
The paradigm itself.
Right. If our biological paradigm is to only care about the identifiable victim right in front of us, and our world is currently facing statistical, invisible threats, like climate change or global resource depletion.
The really big stuff.
Yeah. How can we artificially hack our own psychology? Can we use the tools of design thinking, or maybe even virtual reality, to make the abstract statistics of tomorrow feel like an identifiable victim drowning in a pond today?
Wow. We have to somehow trick our Pleistocene brains into saving the future.
That's the challenge.
That is an incredible thought to end on. So for everyone listening, as you look at your own work this week, try to find the identifiable victim in the spreadsheets you face. It might just change how you approach everything. Thanks for diving in with us.